So I'm going to mix up some lavender colour here. I'm using a little pot and I'm using some ultramarine. You can use cobalt blue if you don't have ultramarine, or any blue will do. It doesn't have to be exactly the same colour as what I'm painting, but I'm just mixing a little bit in this porcelain pot here, just to make a little puddle so I can actually dip in the cotton swab, or bud as we say in the UK. So I've added a little bit of opera rose. You can use permanent rose. So it's kind of a violet colour and it's quite dilute. I'm actually wetting now the top part of the lavender here with my size 8 brush. I'm using this sketchbook here. It is cartridge paper and it does dry very quickly. So I'm speedily using the cotton bud here, dipping it into the sort of wash that I've made there and just sort of painting with the bud on to the sort of outline drawing here, just to see what happens. So while that's sort of drying off a bit, I'm wetting the center part here. So basically I'm painting wet into wet here. So again, loading this cotton bud, which is actually quite nice to paint with here. It takes the pressure off sometimes using other tools rather than brushes to paint with, because it just turns into a little bit of fun and it reminds you to have fun as well. So as you can see, I'm just sort of painting with the cotton bud, this very pale colour, again wetting the surface here. You don't have to wet it, you could actually paint wet on dry with the buds, but I'm just experimenting. So I'm applying this sort of violet colour, wet into wet again. So while the painting's still wet, this is just some quinacridone gold I'm painting in the gaps here and there with my size 8 brush. You could do this with a cotton bud as well, and I'm using ultramarine mixed with some lemon yellow to paint some of the green in there. Wet on dry and a little bit of wet into wet. I'm going to allow now my painting to dry. So once the painting is dry, I'm mixing up a slightly creamier, milkier version of this colour. That's the opera rose and the ultramarine. I'm wetting very carefully the dried surface here with my size 8 brush. I don't want to disturb the paint underneath. And again, I'm loading up my cotton bud here and taking the excess off on the side there and just sort of painting this on the sort of right hand side of the petals there. And it's pretty much damp into damp. And I'm going to use my brush, I'm rinsing it, taking the excess off and sort of blending in that paint to try and get the sort of left hand side of some of those petals a little bit lighter. They are quite fiddly, they're quite small, but just sort of really giving that impression. And again, going on sort of damp into damp again with the cotton bud here. It is so much fun to use. It feels so different actually, and it actually goes on slightly different. It's quite bold, so I quite like it, the marks there, and I thought it would be ideal for something like lavender. The actual marks that it makes, and I'm just softening here and there with a damp size 8 brush here, so just to sort of blend in some of those colours to get, so make sure I've got my lights as well. So I'm just working my way down the lavender here, softening and blending with a clean damp brush. And you can also use a paper towel to lift off if you've lost some of your light there, which is exactly what I'm doing here. And it sort of lifts off the paint, the damp paint, quite nicely as well, just using the sort of edge of the paper towel there. So I'm mixing up a little bit more of the lemon yellow and ultramarine, taking the excess off on my paper towel, using that size 8 brush and just painting a little bit of shadows and details on the stem and on some of those leaves there, just at the tips, wet on dry. Now you can leave this if you like and say that it's finished, but what I thought it'd be quite nice to do to show you how you can paint the background as well. So I'm wetting the background area with my size 10 brush, slightly larger brush, and it does dry very quickly, again, as I said earlier, this cartridge paper. So just wetting carefully around the lavender here, and I haven't actually dried it, so I'm sort of softening some of the edges there, hoping it'll bleed into the background as well, so it kind of sort of comes forward but also blends back into the background, creating a little bit of depth. Now this is fun. I'm using the same colour here, that's the ultramarine and the opera rose, and taking the excess off of my paper towel. It was a little bit too much there, but using the cotton bud and painting with it damp into damp, so that the paper's sort of still got a sheen but it's drying off a bit. And I'm trying to wipe that cotton bud on the side of that little porcelain pot so I don't have too much paint on the cotton bud there. But it's very effective, and because it's damp into damp, it's got lovely soft fuzzy edges, so it kind of looks like it's in the background, so it kind of creates depth. So you don't have to do this on sketchbooks. You could actually do this on watercolour paper and do it as a watercolour painting as well if you wanted to take it a little bit further. Sometimes using a sketchbook takes the pressure off and you can just have a quick go, see if you like it, and then maybe do it as a larger watercolour painting. But I got a bit carried away here. I was really enjoying it, more so than the painting, the one in the centre, which I think I felt a bit tight. Here I'm loose, I'm sort of painting, dabbing, enjoying it sort of thing, and it is quite creative as well here, and the cotton bud is very effective as well. It's creating these great marks and you can sort of just freely sort of paint. And I'm sort of painting the stems now using my size 8 brush, painting them damp into damp with the ultramarine and the lemon yellow. Trying not to really touch the lavender, but if I do, I always try and get fresh paint so that the yellow and ultramarine, that lovely limey green, doesn't get too contaminated. So as you can see, I just got some fresh paint there and swiped in. So it hasn't actually dried off yet, my painting, but I'm just adding a few more sort of dark marks, damp into damp, onto the lavender here with the cotton bud. I felt this came forward too much, this stem, so I've just sort of diluted it a little bit, wet it with water and just lifted off with my paper towel there. So I'm mixing up some burnt sienna here with a touch of the quinacridone gold and painting this on top of the lavender here, damp into damp. Always kind of get yourself some fresh paint so it doesn't get too contaminated. So if it starts to look a little bit dark brown, just get some fresh paint again. And if it's running too much into your flowers, just take the excess off on a paper towel. So I think it's a good idea to allow my painting to dry. Once the painting is dry, I'm just sort of painting sort of wet on dry with the cotton bud here, just here and there, just to show some darks on the distant sort of lavender flowers here. And I just couldn't resist actually, because it's such a fun sort of technique to do, using something different than a ordinary brush. And it's just sort of brings them to life a little bit, and it creates depth in the painting here. So it's just the mixture of the ultramarine and the opera rose. Again, you can use permanent rose or even alizarin crimson, or any pink will do. I'm doing the same on the star of the show right in the centre here, just painting some of those shadow colours here and there, mostly on the sort of right hand side, but also some of the petals are shaded by petals above there as well. So just a few more little dark accents here and there. And I just thought, actually, just looking at the photograph, I could see that there were some little buds below, so I've just popped those in there as well, just to kind of finish off. And I've decided to paint just the little dark bits on the top of the little buds there, with a little bit of ultramarine, a touch of the pink and a touch of Paynes grey as well, just to finish off those details on this sort of central lavender flower. And it just gave me another excuse to use the cotton bud as well. Now you could leave your painting here and say it's finished. That's the great thing, you can be creative about how you're going to leave your painting, it's up to you. But I thought I'd create even another level, so have lavender flowers way off into the distance. So I've wet the background and I'm spattering, yes of course, any excuse to spatter, but I'm spattering some of that lavender colours with my size 8 brush. And now I'm wetting again, it dried very quickly, just around the central bloom here, and I'm going to sort of spatter some bigger blobs just to create a little bit more depth in this sort of way off into the distance. So really loading my brush and spattering again just to get some bigger marks there. And you can vary your colours as well. You can have more of a blue violet or a pinky violet. but I find that quite effective actually as a nice sort of background, abstracty background for my painting. And I'm actually mixing up a little bit of cerulean and some of the lemon yellow and just spattering that into that background. Again, it's dried in some areas, but it's just nice to have a little bit of green as well. And I'm spattering a little bit of that quinacridone gold as well to get that lovely warm colour to finish my painting. I really hope you enjoyed the fun technique of using the cotton bud to paint these lovely lavender flowers, and I hope you're inspired maybe to get your sketchbooks out and continue on with this sketchbook challenge. And more details about that can be found in the description below. If you like this content and you'd like to see more like it, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel where you'll get updates of my latest tutorials. If you'd like to get access to exclusive content, why not think about joining my Patreon membership? Details about that can be found in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.